Welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders on some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 207, which is a really good group chat we've had with Ali Ansari, who's the founder and CEO of Micro1. Micro1 is a platform that helps AI labs and companies find, hire, and manage human experts for data labeling and training. They've been noted as one of the fastest growing startups recently and scaled from a 4 million run rate to over 200 million in the past 12 months. So it was a really great chat with Ali. We went back to the very beginning and how Micro1 initially started as an AI recruiting tool. Ali shared how it evolved into a marketplace, walked us through what the platform experience is like for both AI labs and experts. We got to learn about their incredible growth, how they're leveraging AI to operate and scale so efficiently. We discussed topics like vetting and matching, the future work with AI, and we also had a great group Q&A. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to find it a great watch to the end. I'm really excited to have you join us here today for the group chat. I want to start off by saying huge thanks for taking the time to do so in advance. So of course, we have a lot that we're going to dive into with Micro1 and your journey. But I thought it'd be great if you could start off by briefly sharing a background here for those that might not know you.
My name is Ali. I'm the founder and CEO of Micro1. Studied computer science and math at Berkeley, and it's where I actually started Micro1. It started as something that's quite different than what it is now, which we'll get into. But yeah, excited to be chatting.
Thanks for sharing with us on that. And I guess for a little bit of context, can you give us a brief overview of Micro1 today, and before we dive into things?
Absolutely. So Micro1 is the AI platform for human intelligence. So what we do is we vet highly skilled people, mainly PhDs, professors, and industry experts across many domains, but mainly medical, finance, and legal. And we help train AI models. So you can sort of think of our product as a data engine product that labs use to consume kind of post-training data from. And there's 3 core pillars to it. First is our AI recruiter, which is an agent that essentially sources and vets different experts and adds them to our talent pool / marketplace. And then a second is our data platform, which is where the data is actually created. We have a bunch of AI-based kind of QC mechanisms built in to assure quality. And then lastly, we have a product called Merit that is our talent performance management product that essentially quantifies expert quality on different data pipelines for like data quality being higher, for velocity being high, and so forth. And all these together allow us to kind of help train AI models at frontier labs.
It's gonna be a really helpful, context for us here. And I think a question that you probably get, quite a bit, and you hear probably asking is, why don't the labs kind of do this themselves? Why is outsourcing it to a platform the best solution?
There's a few reasons, and most labs have tried to do it in-house, but they've decided basically not to. And there's 2 kind of core reasons. One is the technology, which is the sort of sourcing and vetting, the data platform, talent performance management, all the rest. Is obviously a difficult technology to build, but it's also a distraction for foundational models that are building LLMs. And the second thing is if you're hiring a bunch of experts in-house, the volume that labs hire is in thousands of experts. And if you're hiring thousands of experts in-house, you're really kind of changing the composition of your internal team from like researchers to just a bunch of different domain experts. And you really kind of start to become not a research lab anymore. So there's these are the 2 core reasons, but there's a bunch more. And really I would say the third one is like the labs heavily have to focus on operations and like data operations if they build some such thing in-house, which we sort of handle.
And, I'm sure it's not like easy to kind of break into, right? So I did want to go back to the very beginning. What was the founding story for starting? And what were the first steps that you actually took to start at the time?
Yeah. So when I was at Berkeley, I was developing a software development agency, and it was a very service oriented, we just built websites and apps for other companies, nothing super special. But one of the main kind of limiting factors at this agency was every time a project would come in, I had to assign engineers to it, and I had to vet and interview a bunch of new engineers to be able to assign to the new projects. And so a lot of my days was spent essentially on interviews. And so I was thinking of ways to, solve this kind of bottleneck that we had and build this internal tool, which was an AI screener that helped me, vet engineers. And then pretty quickly, this AI screener that I built as an internal kind of use case became Micro1. And I ended up kind of selling the tool as a software. Like I started licensing the tool to other companies to use for their recruitment. And then we also started to build this marketplace of this kind of like next generation marketplace of pre-vetted talent that has already gone through these AI interviews. And mainly the talent was focused on engineers, but then we kind of quickly generalized to like product people in general, not just engineers. And startups would hire from that marketplace. So we had this two sides to the business model. One was the AI recruiter software, people subscribe to it, and then we had the marketplace that startups would hire from. And then about a year or two into the business, we realized that the human data world has kind of a new bottleneck, which is the recruitment of experts, and really requires a product that has built already a talent pool that also has the ability to source and vet very quickly any type of talent. So long story short, we decided to basically go all in on that application of what we had built. And now we were sort of building data infrastructure for AGI.
And when you did kind of transition into the marketplace model a little bit more, like what were some of those like initial challenges that you faced?
The challenge with any marketplace is kind of two core things that we were having. One is you have to have supply and demand, at the same time, and when you don't have one, the other is hard to get. And we were facing a little bit of that early on, where we actually didn't have enough demand for like engineer hiring because we had to kind of build up the client base, and so the engineers that would go on the talent pool, oftentimes would be not happy because the duration that it took for them to be placed was kind of longer than expected. So those are challenges that we had to kind of solve. And then I think the other thing was the first versions of our AI interviewer were not the most accurate. So we had to actually have human interviews happen afterwards, after every single AI interview, which was obviously a very large bottleneck. Like there was still a human bottleneck to build this marketplace. So we had to really get the product to be very good in terms of vetting talent to remove the human interviews. And then that really unlocked the supply side even more. So yeah, those are kind of the two main things.
Certainly, the cold start problem is something we all face. And then, yeah, I think for more kind of like traditional, I would say, recruiting and hiring marketplaces, I think one of the challenges, like as firsthand, is not only that kind of sourcing aspect, but then like the vetting and kind of matching. And I think it's really interesting here, your approach in 2026 with AI, right? Like building an AI native marketplace. So could you kind of like walk us through that, how you think about that, like that sourcing and then that vetting and getting to a match?
We look at the talent pool that we have, talent pool / marketplace that we have is very kind of AI native. And what that means is we have an AI recruiter that essentially does the sourcing and vetting for the marketplace. And the sourcing part is a bit more simple. It's two main things. One is programmatic job postings on different platforms on where the jobs are going to kind of perform best. And then the other is, and this part is actually not agentic, which is we have a referral program, and experts that are already active, they refer others, and there's an amazing network effect here, much more than we thought. We initially we were having, if you look back like 3-4 months ago, the referral program was about 30% of all of our hires. Now it's about 50%, and it's growing in percentage really fast. And I think in the long run, it's going to be basically close to 100% of our hires will come from referrals, which means the sourcing mechanism is just completely kind of built in house with the referral program. So that's the sourcing. Now, the vetting is the part that we really emphasize, and we really kind of build a lot around. And there's two components to the vetting. The first is our conversational interviews that happen, which is basically the expert conversates with our agent about skills that they should have for any given job. So if it's an engineer, they're going to be tested on, let's say, React, Node, Python, whatever it is. And each skill is about 5 to 7 minute conversation, just like a human interviewer would interview an engineer. And it sort of starts with a question, and based on how the expert is answering it, it goes into different directions and kind of digs deeper and has a natural conversation flow. And then after the conversational part, there's an exercise that happens, which is you can think of it as like a take home almost exercise, but it happens live. And for programmers, it's of course a coding exercise, but for every other domain, this doesn't really exist. So what we've built is a model that can generate exercises for any domain. So if you have a lawyer that's being tested, they are doing some sort of like redlining, and there's like a contract interface, and they're building rubrics to actually allow for the redlining to be to be good redlining. And then if you have like a a doctor, maybe a radiologist, maybe they're looking at some image and they're analyzing it. So basically, we've built this model that can generate exercises on the fly that's completely customized to exactly what the job needs. And then this allows us to really deeply vet any given candidate. And then once they go through the whole process, which is the conversation report and the exercise, we generate a report on how they did. And there's basically on each skill, there's a rating, and then we have recruiters that look at those and kind of determine the final fit of the candidates.
Yeah, and you mentioned network effects earlier, which is like a fun topic that we're always discussing here. So yeah, I guess like on that note, when did this like flywheel really start to kind of kick in here, and like what did network effects look like for Micro1?
I think it was the first maybe week or two of launch. It was already kind of looking like 10 to 15% of our hires on a kind of a projected basis, and then within a couple of months, it was already 30% of all hires were coming from referrals, and now it's above 50%. So it's a product that we actually should have launched a lot earlier. I thought that it would help with sourcing, but I thought it would just be kind of a small part of all our sourcing strategies. But it ends up looking like it's going to be the main and maybe even the only sourcing strategy that we need. So I think part of it is you have to have a high NPS score. Obviously the experts need to have a high probability of referring their friends. But if that's true, and if there's a lot of kind of happy folks on the marketplace, then I think a referral program will likely be a pleasant surprise.
Certainly, and I actually had a note for a talking point that I want to discuss that a little bit later, but it was around that happiness and how you're actually measuring that on the supplier kind of expert side.
One of the things that we emphasize heavily is just taking a very human first approach. There's I think there's something that's sort of undermined in this space a little bit. The people that are the way that models improve is really just people. Like there's many people across many domains that are distilling their structured human judgment into these models, and then the models become more useful for the rest of humanity. So this is a very important job, and we need to really treat it as such. So the approach that we take at Micro1 is putting the expert experience as like the number one thing for us, and we really build our product around that. So I'll give you some examples on the recruitment phase. Once the experts finish the interview, there's a rating that they have to give, which is did you enjoy the experience, and what do you rate it, and if you have any comments, leave the comments. And we've had this rating go from, I believe a while ago, from like 3.8, 3.9 to now a 4.5 out of 5, and this continues to rise pretty quickly. And we essentially take the feedback at every step of the funnel and really build our sprints around candidate experience. And the belief that we have is long term, the company that wins this kind of human data space is the one that attracts the best talent and is really the one that makes the best place to train AI models. And the labs will go simply to where the talent is, where the best experts are. And so, if we're that company that has the most exceptional experts, that has experts that are kind of loyal to the brand, then naturally the labs will have to sort of go to us mainly. So yeah, those are some of the ways. And there's also this this notion of incentivizing our project leads based on the expert happiness index, which is as this measure kind of goes up, there's like the commission of experts or the commission of project leads actually are variable based on it and also go up. So there are these sort of mechanisms that we have built in the process, but we also have our model also looks at the probability that an expert will be satisfied on any given job and considers that in the overall AI match score before the candidate is actually matched with the job.
I'm sure it'll lead to a few questions once we get to the group Q&A. But if we kind of jump over to like the job side, what were those like initial like jobs that you were working on with like the AI labs, and then how did you think about like expanding and kind of adding new types of jobs?
The jobs are in a very wide set of domains. The way to think about kind of AI training in general is there's an expert that is trying to find something the model is not good at, which is a task or a prompt that the model fails at in their domain of expertise. And then, of course, the data structures and kind of pipelines vary, but for the most part, they're creating rubrics that define what a good answer would be. So model comes up with an answer, expert determines this answer is actually not good, and the expert essentially stomps the model. And then they come up with rubrics that define what is an actual golden response. And a rubric is essentially a set of, or rubrics are a set of binary statements that essentially determine what should be included in the answer. So if you have let's say a model needs to do some sort of redlining on a contract and like as a response, give some sort of memo as well as the actual redlining of that contract. The rubrics would define, the specific red lines that must have had happened, as well as what should be included in the memo. And this, each data point often takes anywhere from like 10 to 20 hours to create. And this creates verifiable rewards for AI models to then to be evaluated, but then to also then train on that data. So this is the type of work. And what we started with is finance. We've had a pretty heavy focus on finance, and then now we have 100 plus domains that we're working in, active pipelines. But there's kind of 4 or 5 main domains that take a good portion of all the work that we do, and those are medical, finance, legal, coding, and then there's a lot of kind of voice experts like voice actors and these sort of adjacent roles.
And I believe too, didn't you recently expand into robotics?
Yeah, we're also in robotics. There's 3 data verticals that we have broadly. First is what we call Realm, which is frontier evals and RL environments for foundational models. And then the second is what we call Cortex, which is contextual evals for enterprise agents, which we actually had a launch today about that. And then the third is robotics, which is real world robotics data for models that can act in the physical world.
Very cool. And I did want to spend some time talking about your growth, which is really incredible. And I know you've shared about it on social. I believe going from 4 million to over 200 million in run rate. Can you walk us through how you've approached growth?
So yeah, we started 2025 with roughly 4 million run rates. We ended just under 150, and now in 2 months into 2026 we're actually quite above 200. We're now approaching 300. So growth is accelerating very fast. I think, obviously we're trying to execute well, but we also have to give credit to the market. The market there's an insane amount of demand for data, and if you can, if you can recruit the right experts and have pipelines set up in a way where you can assure quality and just provide lots of high quality kind of expert data, which obviously is not easy to do, the labs will buy it. And there's, they're asking for more in every pipeline. And of course, it's not just the labs now, it's enterprises that have labs within them, but it's also enterprises that don't even have labs. They also need evals for agents they're building. So everyone needs data, and everyone needs kind of expert level data to get agents that work in this context of actually useful work. So, the approach we take is actually a very non-salesy approach to our go-to-market. We don't have that many customers. Like we have 10, 12 very important customers. And so we take the approach of building real trust and real relationships with them versus this sort of aggressive selling motion. So I think that's one. And then that results in just natural demand that comes as we provide good quality. And then the way that we keep up with this demand is we try to productize our operations as much as we can. So instead of hiring more recruiters, we make sure our AI recruiter can just do more over time. And we have our project leads. Essentially, we have this key metric that is how many pipelines does each project lead own, and we make sure that this number is quickly increasing, which means our product is doing a lot more of the work. So these are things that we sort of focus on to allow us to actually be able to capture this demand.
That's really interesting to hear about. And yeah, I was going to ask one of the questions that I wanted to discuss a little bit was how you're leveraging kind of AI as far as for internal operations and efficiencies as you scale, because I can only imagine things start to break with growth sometimes, but this is unprecedented kind of growth.
We actually recently centralized our AI department to really help across the org. Of course, the AI department mainly focuses on the 3 kind of main products that we're building and really maximizing kind of automations there. But there's also a lot of one-offs that that certain teams need that actually help them a lot. And so centralizing the AI department was a move we made recently that kind of allows for this kind of more AI throughout the org. But it's really the three products that we have that allow us to do this. Of course, the AI recruiter, but then the data platform is another one, which is it's where the data gets created, and there's a lot of human review mechanisms built in, but we complement those with AI-based review mechanisms. So we have this tool called Rhea that essentially looks at data instruction guidelines and then looks at data points that are being submitted by experts and assures that data structures are actually being met and gives instant feedback to experts before it goes to the human review layer. So this is a product that this is a model that we built and that we kind of continue to iterate on that helps us increase the efficiency on the pipelines. And on the Merit platform, an example would be it's basically a talent performance management platform that showcases each expert and on how they're doing. And then project leads go in there, and based on how experts are doing, they perform actions like bonuses, raises, and potential replacements. And as we get this platform to be more and more sophisticated, it will automatically suggest these actions, and project leads would go in there and just kind of confirm. And so these things are really important for us to kind of continue developing on and making pipelines more efficient.
Certainly. And then, on the note as far as team building and hiring, how do you kind of approach that? And then I would say, kind of creating this culture of moving so fast.
We try not to default to hiring. This is something that we've built in the culture pretty deeply, which is like, this is not exactly the right phrase to use, but folks are almost scared to ask me to hire. And I think this is actually a good thing, because it means that our team is not actually defaulting to hiring every time there's a problem and kind of trying to throw hires at it. So what we do is we try to keep the team lean and really hire when we absolutely need to. And when we do hire, we look for two main qualities. One is just pure agency of that person. Like, will they care and will they really put in the work that's required? And the second is, can we kind of see that there's a risk-taking appetite from the candidate that we're hiring? We tend to hire folks that are okay to take risk and are kind of bold even when they just start, because the pipelines that are owned by our project leads and other types of people, they're really they need to own the pipelines end to end, and they need to make decisions without kind of asking for permission often. So these are two things that we look for when we hire. And we try to celebrate, to kind of increase the risk-taking probability at the company. We try to celebrate mess ups. I mean, of course, not just pure mess ups, but if there's a mess up and there's a nice kind of comeback afterwards, and there's more trust built with the client because of it, we really celebrate those. And we make there's a case recently where there was a bit of a mess up, which then resulted in actually a lot more trust built after. We actually made this person that resulted in this mess up the team member of the month. So we do these sort of things that that kind of increase the overall risk-taking appetite for the company, which results in moving faster. And we look for those qualities when we're hiring.
And another topic that I wanted to briefly kind of chat about here before we get to the group Q&A is around fundraising. And most recently announced your $35 million Series A round, and had some top investors on board. So what has the fundraising journey been like so far? And what are some of your, early fundraising learnings?
Across three rounds, we did pre-seed, seed, and then we did our A recently, like you said, raised total of about $40 million. Fundraising journey has not always been super smooth, is the truth. I mean, especially the first two rounds that we did. The first round took, essentially a year to close. It depends on when you kind of call it kicking off, but when you start a company and once you've bootstrapped some traction, you start to get into fundraising mode pretty much right away, and often takes a while to actually get it done. So first round took a long time. Second round took a little bit of less time, and then of course Series A was a bit more smooth. But each round has its own kind of difficulties, and I think I think one thing that is probably not said often is how difficult rounds are for most founders. I think once a round is announced, you sort of put a bow on top of it, you make a nice video, and it all looks good, and then it looks easy. But then I think no one can really see like what went into it. And so what happens is I think there's this wrong frame of reference that founders get because they see all these announcements. They're like, oh wow, it's like really easy for everyone else. Like why is it taking so long for me? I think that's actually the wrong way to look at it, because those announcements, it wasn't easy to get to that point for pretty much anyone. And if your round is like not going well, it's okay. It's like the norm. And at some point it will be done, and then you will also put a bow on it and announce it, and then it will also look easy. And then after some time, you will likely forget how hard it actually was in retrospect. And that's part of the journey too, because now you're like feeling confident again for the next round because you sort of forgot how hard it just was. So these are things that I kind of remind myself as we go into new rounds. I'm like, I think obviously growth is great and we're profitable and all these things, but still it's not going to be like a smooth sailing thing that we sort of think each time.
It's gonna be a helpful reminder. I think a lot of times you just see the headlines constantly, right? So
exactly.
Cool. So we're gonna get to the group Q&A, but right before we do you have any tips for founders building AI native marketplaces in 2026?
The first version of our product was obviously this marketplace which companies could hire pre-vetted engineers from, but really the version that stuck well and resulted in this crazy growth was using this marketplace as part of our overall infrastructure that we've built for this one kind of use case, which is a bit more hands-on and a bit more of a white glove service that we productize in the back end. So I would say, oftentimes there's one or two applications that are very clear that are working from the marketplace infrastructure you've built. I wouldn't be afraid to lean into those one or two applications and kind of make it a bit more niche versus at least for some time, versus like a general marketplace build out. That's something that did very well for us. But once we decided to go all in on the data use case, that's when really the growth started.
I think that's gonna be super helpful. Cool. So we're going to get to the group Q&A, and I actually want to ask a question that was set in advance to kind of help kick things off here. And it was actually around the future of work with AI. And so I was asking, how do you think the future of work will start to kind of play out, with AI, and also, potential paths of like AI training?
I think long term, there's likely a good percentage of the, probably anywhere from like 3 to 5% of all human labor will be spent on AI training. And there's, the way to think about this is, if you look at the kind of current state of, let's use an example, lawyers, they're spending time at their law firm creating unstructured data, essentially. Like when they're working for their clients, they're creating some sort of redlining and creating some doc that they sent over email. And then that doc that was sent creates value in the economy, but then it's sort of lost after that, and it's sort of very unstructured. Now, the alternative is like working at a company like Micro1 and doing that redlining in a structured manner, which then models can improve from, which then help your job in the future. And currently, the economy as a whole has essentially decided that lawyers should get paid about 20% more doing structured work versus unstructured. And if you look at our talent pool, we have about 1,000 active lawyers that are working on on data pipelines, and their pay is about 20% more what they make in their day job. So what this means for the future of work is that you have to assume that of course, you cannot infer that because lawyers, for example, are more valuable as determined by how much they're getting paid creating structured data. You cannot assume that all lawyers should go and create structured data, because then obviously the economy must continue functioning. And so, but I think you could assume that there's this equilibrium that will reach where some small percentage of all human labor across all domains will work on AI training, will work on structured human judgment creation for models to improve to then kind of build agents. So that's that I think is the main thing that we're trying to like capture, that market that we're trying to capture, and that's the main kind of change that we'll see in the future of work.
I like that, the way you kind of frame it as far as like, structured versus unstructured data as well. So I think about it like that.
Exactly.
Hey, Neil, saw you raise your hand. Do you want to jump on?
Thanks, Ali. I wanted to come back to referrals, partially because we have a somewhat shared supply side. Halo's a R&D partnering network, so we're connecting like big R&D orgs at enterprises like Pepsi or kind of traditional companies with researchers, typically PIs at universities or startups. So in that sense, like it's very similar, I think, of who you're reaching. We have not turned on a referral program yet. You mentioned NPS score, and our internal debate is like adverse selection. So like what was the right NPS score of like, if you clear this hurdle, it'll probably work. And then did you experience any adverse selection or see a change that was not what you were hoping for and who was being referred?
It's a good question. In terms of NPS score, I don't think there's like a threshold. I mean, I think if your NPS score is super high, you're likely going to be very surprised with how important and how much of an impact the referral program will have. And if it's, if it's a little bit lower, then I think it will still have a good impact, but probably just a little bit less. So I wouldn't wait for like a threshold necessary. But I think the adverse selection issue is one that we think about. There's an adjacent issue, which is just gaming the system and having folks that may actually refer in a kind of wrongful manner and kind of make money from it. So we've done the way that we try to fight against that is our vetting process. Like, everyone that goes through anyone that's referred goes through the same vetting. And if you pass our vetting, it's really hard to game the vetting. Like there's a proctoring model that looks at whether or not you're cheating. There's a conversational part. There's an exercise that takes about an hour to do, and it really digs deep on your skills. And it's very hard to game. Like you either have the skills or you don't, and it doesn't care where you're from, who you are. Like it's just based on the actual skill sets. And then the second part is that there's a mechanism we built, which is you cannot get paid out unless the expert actually works 10 hours. Once the expert puts in 10 hours, then it's considered hired, and then you get paid out. And even if there's an expert that has gamed the vetting, if they join a pipeline, they will not survive being able to put 10 hours of work in if they're not actually good for that pipeline. And so these two things allow for us to not have this kind of bias selection, as well as like reduce its chance of gaming the system, essentially.
I'm going to help ask a question that Iggy sent me in the chat. He said he's in a noisy space, but it was around more about the project leads. And so he was asking, for a little bit more on like how they spend their time across, clients with experts. And then, what's been the biggest difference in optimizing how much volume they can handle?
Project leads are essentially what we call strategic project leads. They're essentially the ones that own the pipeline end to end. So on one side of the pipelines, there's some experts. There's let's say it's a medical pipeline, there's going to be maybe 200 doctors, maybe there's surgeons all around the world that are working on some, model improvement. In this case, the project lead will also likely be a doctor as well. We like to hire kind of expert project leads that understand the domain well. And, some of the things they would do is they would set up instruction guidelines for the experts. They would set up our automated chatbot that supports experts called Lumi. They would help set up the data platform to actually be able to support the data taxonomy to start creating the data. They sort of host office hours, kickoff calls, these sort of things. And then on the other side, they are interfacing with researchers and really providing updates on how the pipeline is going and what the quality of the data is and what the velocity is and so forth. And it's actually a really fun job because it's you get to work with best-in-class domain experts, and then on the other side, you get to work with best-in-class researchers. So it's like a very happy middle ground to be in.
Certainly sounds fun. So, and then another question that was actually added in advance was around more so around like the moats and defensibility in the space. And so, it's highly competitive. So how do you think about, moats and defensibility for, marketplaces in the AI data and training space?
The first and most important is actually around the marketplace that gets built. The network effect on the marketplace is the biggest moat. We and very similar to that is us being able to build the best AI recruiter model. as we have more and more interviews done, we have a lot more candidates that go through our funnel. There's more active candidates that are working on the pipelines, and then the active candidates on the pipelines give us ground truth performance data on the job. And that allows us to actually improve our AI vetting model, because our AI vetting model is trying to predict the performance on the job. And so there's this like very nice data flywheel that gets built to improve our model. But also, as we improve the model, we get more experts, and the more experts start to refer more of their friends, which then again, there's higher kind of amount of top of funnel sourcing that happens. And this flywheel just keeps going. There's it's incredibly difficult to catch up to a flywheel like this that starts to scale. I mean, of course, everyone on this call knows the sort of the Uber kind of network effect and the incredible moat that they have. Even with self-driving coming out, I think they have a distribution moat that is really, really valuable. So that is the first and most important moat. The second is the products that we build on our data platform, like the one I was saying earlier, Rhea, which basically is an AI-based QC system that we've spent like a lot of R&D on, making it really accurate in terms of being able to assess data quality and therefore reduce average handling time on the pipelines. And then there's also this other product that's very similar that we call Flow, which is essentially ultimately going to allow us to build like a cursor-like data platform experience where a lot of the rubrics and other things are generated automatically, not entirely, but at least some portions of it, which then experts kind of review. So it makes their job faster. And as tasks get longer and longer horizon on these data pipelines, we must do things like that to try to control the kind of average handling time. So that's also an important move for us.
Cool. So I think we had a question. Hey, Gabriel, did you want to jump on here?
I guess like I have maybe two questions. Like one is if there's any like the one main piece of advice you would give to like a traditional like marketplace like founder building in this day and age. And then I wonder if there's any huge adjacent opportunity like similar to the space you're in that you feel it's only going to get bigger and bigger that is potentially being overlooked.
I think in terms of advice for marketplace build-outs, I would say the thing that comes to mind is and this is a bit cheesy to say. I think a lot of folks have sort of said this, but I think it's important, which is you should really build your marketplace in a way that as LLMs improve, the mechanisms within your marketplace improves. Like even if you stopped development, I think that the test is like if you pause all development and you just kind of watch LLMs improve, will your marketplace and the quality of your product improve over time? And the answer should be yes. And I think you have to kind of take that. You have to take that to almost an extreme where if there are certain things that don't actually require LLM usage, you should still consider LLM usage, and then you sort of will pull back on things that actually end up not requiring it. So this is one thing that we have at Micro1, which is we try to use foundational models that we ironically help improve as well, but we try to use them everywhere in our products. And of course, there's a lot of parts where we do have to build smaller models on our end, like our proctoring model is an example that has nothing to do with LLMs, and we just kind of build a traditional ML model from scratch. And there's a bunch of examples like that, but we sort of bias towards foundational models first, and I think this is a very important kind of product architecture decision that I would recommend. And then in terms of adjacent areas, I think this area of enterprise evaluations is very much underlooked. I mean, we have a product that we actually just launched in this space, so we're this is a bit competitive to us if you go in the space, but I think it's okay because there's a lot of room here, and there's not many people actually building in the right way in the space, and the space is essentially helping enterprises kind of rethink their product development lifecycle. And what I mean by that is, if you think of like deterministic software, the way you test deterministic software is you have a QA engineer, and they sort of look at whether or not things are working, and it's a very binary thing. If the thing works, you can go to production. But for probabilistic software, or in other words, agents, you have to take the action space of that agent. What are the things that it can do? And then you have to qualitatively assess each of those actions by domain experts that know how to do those actions, and see how well the agent does on each of those. And this is something that's not well understood by enterprises yet. There's always this notion of like, okay, I'll run evals at the end as like a final testing before I go to production. But it's actually the wrong way to think about it. You have to eval your way to production. Like you have to start the product development with evaluations. It's really one of the only things you need to do actually to build agents. So building in this space, I think, is a very important opportunity. That there's many things to do in the space. One of them is obviously what we do, which is like providing the human experts and data pipelines to actually create the evals. But there's many other things that are adjacent to build in this space. I think it's one that will be one of the largest markets that will exist that does not exist yet.
So we're out of time, Ali, but huge thanks for taking the time to join us here for the group chat. I think this is fun. I know we bounce around a little bit, but covered quite a bit, and it's great to hear about all of your experience, learnings, and appreciate helping answer some of the questions that we had. And I actually had my usual kind of closing question that I want to ask, and it's somewhat related to Gabrielle's question, which is if you could go right back to before you started Micro1, what would you tell yourself about marketplaces specifically?
Don't underestimate the supply side. Once the supply side is there, demand often comes in some form. And this is what we experienced, year and a half ago, where we sort of made one fundamental change that resulted in our supply side really exploding. And then that's when the labs actually became customers. All of them became customers. And of course, there's like, you can point to many other things that resulted in labs being customers. But fundamentally, they're there because the experts are there. So, like, I think oftentimes the focus on supply side gets a bit ignored, and there's only kind of focus to generate demand, which of course you need to balance. That's the whole kind of paradox of marketplaces. But I think the supply side being emphasized in a lot of cases is actually possibly more important than demand.
Yeah, great parting advice for us. And then last but not least, time for a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you and all along?
Yeah, just my Twitter, I think will be good.
Awesome. I'll include links, and I'll have lots of marketplace founders coming your way. So once again, I really appreciate taking the time to join us for the group chat, and congrats on all the progress.